When Clark Kent's trip to Krypton's past sees him branded as a criminal, will he be able to escape? Not if the Science Council has anything to say about it. What'll happen next? Well, let's hop into the pages of Action Comics issue number 1075 and 1076 as we catch up on this weekly series. Alrighty then, so as we join the first issue in our two-pack this week, Clark and his parents, Jor-El and Laura, are all in prison following their arrest at the end of the last issue. This is all the work of Roseanne, one of Jor-El's rivals in the Science Council, who wants to steal all of his inventions and pass them off as his own. Did I also mention that Roseanne was something of a romantic rival for Laura's hand back in the day, which is also a major motivator for him? Also, I totally didn't know this until someone pointed it out to me, but apparently Roseanne is actually a character from the old Superman radio plays. Between this and the Super Friends deep cut from early on in the series, Mark Waid really is rewarding longtime Superman fans from multiple different generations all in one series, and honestly, I just love to see it. Now, back in the B story, Connor Kent and Kong Keenan are still dealing with the Khund invasion, though they quickly realize that the guy they've been dealing with isn't actually the head honcho, and that if they want to get anything done, they have to talk to the Over-Admiral. Kong tries to deal with the situation diplomatically, while Connor challenges the guy to a fight, and it's a good thing too. That the Khund are one of those rigid warrior code type races, meaning whoever proves themselves to be the strongest and beats the old boss gets to be the new boss. But more on that in a minute. Superman and his parents end up getting brought before a Science Council tribunal, complete with the big giant heads that we all know and love. The trial is already pretty rigged against Jor-El, who the planet sees as a crackpot. Roseanne decides to steal the Phantom Zone projector first, saying that it would really help the Kryptonians deal with their criminal problems, sending their criminals off to an alternate dimension being a lot more cost-effective than cryogenically freezing them and launching them into space via rocket. Naturally, Jor-El ends up fighting against this, and Superman is ultimately really relieved to see that his father isn't the sort of person who would be okay torturing inmates with a fate that is arguably worse than death. In the end, the Science Council are forced to cut Jor-El loose due to all the good work him and his family have done for the planet, and really this was just about stealing the projector. In the end, though, Laura actually proves to be the real MVP of this story, making a big scene in front of Roseanne and the Council so that Jor-El could steal away Superman's very much needed solar bands. You know, those things Superman desperately needs to get back home. Jor-El might not have an answer for the Man of Steel, but he figures his brother Zor-El might very well. This actually ends up being a very fun little outing for Clark, as he is able to hang out with his Uncle Zor in a way that he never really has before, and even meets a younger Kara, who turns out is actually much more of a hellraiser than she ever let on when telling Superman stories about her youth back on Krypton. It's here too, as the first issue comes to a close, Superman asks a very important question of his scientist father, and that is, say, oh, I don't know, hypothetically an all-powerful being is trying to reshape the Phantom Zone? What do you think that would actually end up meaning? Jor-El says that that sort of process would end up being completely disastrous, as even if you are an all-powerful being, you can't just make matter out of nowhere, it's gotta come from somewhere. And in this case, it seems that Aether has chosen to siphon away solar energy from Earth's very sun, causing it to go dark, right before the eyes of Jimmy and Lois back in Metropolis. Now, it's from there we end up hopping into issue 1076. Zor-El says that he might very well have the answer to Superman's problems, a special solar battery that should be able to charge the bands. The only problem is that Roseanne confiscated that alongside all of Jor-El's other stuff. Oh, he could probably take another one, unfortunately it would end up taking him years to do so, and as Superman very unfortunately blurts out, no one on Krypton has years, which in turn causes him to briefly fade in and out of existence, all Marty McFly style here. Again, Superman is so invested in the goings-on of ancient Krypton, he forgot to remember that his actions could still very much end up messing with the timeline, and on a certain level, maybe Superman wants to try and warn all of these people, maybe that the future could be different if only because of his actions. But still, it's too much of a risk just to try and make him happy. Here's where things get really interesting too. When they do actually breach the subject of Krypton's impending disaster, Zor-El ends up going off, apparently as the #1 climatologist and geologist on the planet, even he thinks his brother is a crackpot. In fact, he gets so mad at Clark for playing into what he believes to be his brother's delusions, he just kicks everyone out. Obviously, history is on Jor-El's side. It's just kind of interesting to think that the House of El was so divided in the final days of the planet's history. Now, back over with the Superboys, Connor is ready to follow the Over-Admiral into the murder pit so they can have themselves their big honor fight. Keenan vows to try and help Connor from the sidelines, only to find out way too quickly that the Khund actually take cheating very seriously in their whole warrior code, and they all basically end up attacking him at once, meaning that Keenan has to fight for his life. Here's the funny thing though, Superboy actually wins the fight with the Khund leader off panel, meaning that Super-Man didn't actually have to do anything, though Keenan does ask Connor, wait, did you kill that other guy? Only to hear, nah, I used my tactile telekinesis to trap him. You'll be pissed when he gets out, but hopefully we'll be long gone by then. Now, with no other options left and the clock ticking, Superman has no choice but to try and break into the Science Council HQ and liberate the battery that will help him charge his bands. At first, this seems pretty easy, as probably no one on Krypton ever thought to actually rob the Science Council in this era. Superman almost got away with it completely scot-free too, were it not for the fact that his uncle was still very suspicious of him from before, and because of that ended up dropping a dime on Clark Kent to the space cops. Now, to be fair, in Zor-El's defense, Clark was acting pretty damn suspicious, and Zor jumped to the conclusion that this guy must be a spy for Zod, or maybe even working for the then topical mad scientist Va Cox, who was actually only the second person ever sentenced to the Phantom Zone, in case you're wondering. Superman judo flips his uncle and makes his escape. Unfortunately, before he can charge his bands fully, he ends up running directly into Roseanne, who isn't a dummy in his own right. He figured that there was no Clark Kent in Krypton's registry, meaning that this guy must be some sort of outsider. With no options left, Clark just decides to keep this guy talking by admitting the truth. Yeah, I'm a time traveler. Moreover than that, the world is basically doomed due in no small part to how you treated Jor-El, but hey, if you act fast and don't kill me, you can still rewrite the histories to where you were the best, most important guy ever, and he was a crazy crackpot. And believe it or not, this gamble actually ends up working, as Superman has just enough time to charge his bands, regain his amazing power, and escape. Though understandably, Superman does all of this with a very heavy heart, even shedding a couple tears along the way, as he knows full well leaving now that Krypton's fate will go on unchanged. Things also don't get much better for Superman either when he finally does make it back to the Phantom Zone, only to find out that the whole place has been incredibly changed by Aether, who has decided to make it an even worse, even more hellish dimension. And believe it or not, it's on that note right there the comic comes to a close, everybody, and so that was Action Comics issue number 1075 and 1076, and honestly, I'm glad I read these two issues back to back, because on their own, I would have felt either issue was a little thin, but taken together, they actually end up telling a pretty fun story about Superman grappling with the fate of Krypton and how little he can actually change it, while also taking solace in knowing that his parents were good, cool people, in many ways actually completely different than the visions of them he had created in his own mind. There's also a pretty good backup story in one of these issues too, involving Perry White finally winning the mayor's race that he's been in basically since the Joshua Williamson Superman series run started, so definitely check that one out if you're a completionist like me. I promise you won't be disappointed. Overall, I think I'd feel comfortable giving this one another 8 out of 10. It's fun, it's exciting, it moves at a good pace, it's basically everything a weekly series should be, and I hope I don't end up falling behind again. Hey there everyone, it's your pal Cape Joel again, and if you're seeing my face right now, that means you watched to the end of the video, and I'll always be grateful for that. Retention helps in this crazy YouTube game, and so does becoming a patron. If you head on down to the description, you can find a link to my Patreon page. Recently just redid all the tiers, a lot of cool stuff offering up there, exclusive commentaries, exclusive polls, behind the scenes concept art for Capes and Quest, that's the brand new D&D show I've started soon. Never been a better time to become a patron. You can become a patron for as little as $1 a month and help the channel grow, and help me continue to deliver content like what you just saw. So I want to thank you all, and I will see you again next time. Bye-bye.